Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. To no one's surprise, we have got another Wheel of Time book review video to do. Now, if everything has gone to plan, you should be seeing this video 2 weeks after my Shadow Rising video dropped, because hopefully I've finished this book by then. If you are new to the channel, and for some reason you're starting on my 5th Wheel of Time book review video, the way I do these book reviews is I give my thoughts and my predictions before I start reading the book, and then I do my thoughts, feelings, and predictions halfway through the book, and then I finish off with a real review at the end. But because this book is 1,000 pages long, I will probably do a review at 300 pages and another review at 600 pages. So let's get straight into it with what are my predictions for The Fires of Heaven. So I really liked The Shadow Rising. I thought The Shadow Rising was great, and I felt as if The Shadow Rising did a lot in regards to setting up long-lasting plot threads and throwing them out to last right up until the end of the series. Now, as for The Fires of Heaven, I am going to put on record as my first official prediction is that the woman that is traveling with Nynaeve and Elaine, the Shonchan woman, I have a feeling that she will betray the girls and she will steal the shackles that the Black Aja were planning on shackling Rand with. It is my official prediction that she will steal those shackles and try and give them to her Empress to elevate herself. Or she might not even do it as like a selfish act of like trying to gain more esteem for herself. Maybe she will do it as a way to redeem herself or as a way to keep herself safe. Like there was that Inquisitor guy or something that came and was harassing her in the last book. Maybe he will come back and be like, you haven't made enough progress, or we're worried that you've switched teams or something. And the only way to stop herself from having a gruesome death at this guy's hands is if she promises to get them this leash, these shackles. So that's prediction number one, that she will betray them either for selfish gaining reasons or to stop herself from being tortured and killed. As for the girls themselves, I really have only one of two options that in my head that they would go down. Either they head back to the White Tower, and on their way, they hear about the coup that the new Amarillion seat made to kick out the last Amarillion seat, and then they end up finding that woman and Logain, and they all work together to try and like overthrow the new Amarillion seat. Either that happens, or they don't even bother going back to the White Tower and they continue hunting the Black Aja. But I don't really see that happening because they have already found out the magic or whatever that they were planning on using against Rand, which was those shackles. But I can see them still hunting the Black Aja out of like spite, or, you know, it's the right thing to do. Or they did hear that plan that when they had those other Black Aja sisters captive, they heard them talking about how they were going to set Rand up by using another man that could channel, and then having him like destroy a bunch of places and saying that it was Rand do it. So I'm not really sure where their story is going, but I can really only see it going down two paths. As for Rand, the only thing that I can see Rand doing is leading the Aiel out of the waste. And what I really hope happens in this story, for my own selfish reasons, not from like a storytelling standpoint, but just because I think it would be really cool, is I hope we get a lot more information with like Rand crossing the waste, and then like the story ends with him reaching the spine of the world, or like crossing the spine of the world into the Wetland Society. And pretty much that entire like book journey of Rand traveling across the waste is all about just learning more about the Aiel, learning more about the like in-depth, complicated politics that they've got going on. Maybe that fella and all the Aiel that like walked away, maybe they ambushed them and there's a whole lot of drama in regards to like the fighting clans. But really, for my own selfish reasons, I do hope that we get a lot more Aiel world building, because I loved it. I loved all of the Aiel world building. And generally, you know, world building can be something that is quite tedious and boring. And I never thought that in a Robert Jordan book I would be going, I want more world building. Tell me more about the coats they're wearing and the brass button that they're wearing. How hemmed is the neckline and doilies and ruffles and whatever. Give it all to me. I want more of it. But also with Rand, we've got that Forsaken fella that Lanfear blocked off from the One Power, except for like a small trickle, so he could teach Rand more about the One Power and channeling and magic and all that, which is something that I am actually really looking forward to reading about, because we have gotten a lot of like channeling and the One Power and magic use and all that from the lady's perspective. It'll be really interesting to see it from Rand's perspective, because one of the things that I think will be emphasized is they said that when the girls were teaching Rand how to use the magic in the Tear, or in the stone, sorry, in Tear, it was something like the women found it easier to use water and air magic, and Rand found it easier to use earth and fire, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. So it would be really interesting to see how after, 5 stories, and he's had all this time to think about all the like crazy things Rand can do with magic and how strong he is, it'll be interesting to see if he does anything like really cool and creative with that extra focus on something different to what the ladies focus on. As for Matt, I honestly have no idea what to make of Matt, because I gave my predictions in the last video for my last story. I gave the prediction that I thought Matt would be finding out more about where his like luck comes from. Is it good or is it bad? But that didn't really happen. He just kind of got like swept up in Rand's story. And I remember, not The Shadow Rising, but the one before it, I remember finding it so interesting and having a lot of fun with Matt and all of his like gamblings and all of his luck, and pretty much everything that was going on with his character development. I was having a lot of fun with that, and I really hope that we get more Matt being a scallywag, gambling, whatever else. I really hope that we get a lot more Matt in this story, and he's not just kind of like an afterthought in Rand's story. And unfortunately, I did feel the same way with Egwene. She did have her own thing going on where she was trying to learn how to be a dreamwalker with the Wise Ones. But she, after like a certain point, did also feel like Matt, how she was just kind of like swept up in Rand's story. She was just kind of reacting to Rand's story happening. So I do hope either we get a lot more, say, power growth from Egwene, or she goes back with the other girls and helps them do their Black Aja hunting, or helps the Amarillion seat throw another coup to throw out the ladies that betrayed her. Because I also have the prediction for like the end of the series that Egwene becomes the Amarillion seat, and she shackles Rand with like the shackles, and they share their power through the two, what are they called? The Terangrials or something. The ones with like, they're holding the spheres or the orbs, and it corresponds to like the giant statue that they found in like the second book. It is my like ultimate long range Hail Mary pass prediction that Egwene becomes the Amarillion seat, shackles Rand, together they use the two things, and they change the world, they break the world, the wheel turns another notch. Maybe they find out that the Dark One can't be killed after all, and they figure out that they have to work together by using their like things and the thing, and they recreate the seals and lock the Dark One back into his prison. As for Perrin, I'm not really sure what to make of Perrin, because in the last book, Perrin's story was by far my favorite one. I would say that his story started off the worst, but by the time it ended, it was like so great. And I liked everything to do with like how he went back to Edmund's Field and how he protected it, and like how we got to see the, Tam and Matt's dad and the families. And in the end, how he married Fail. I did really enjoy all of that. But I have to say that I have a feeling that Perrin is going to feel the like tug of the Tavaren, and like the tug of like Rand and the Aiel that he was traveling with. I have a feeling they're going to like maybe get a message, or someone's going to dreamwalk to them, or they're going to feel like a tug, and they're all going to like be drawn to wherever Rand is going to come out of the waste, and maybe at the end of the book they will like meet up there. But apart from that, I don't really know what to predict with Perrin's story, because his story did really wrap up quite well, to tell you the truth. If Perrin left this story altogether, like if that was it, if Perrin was just like, hey, I'm back home now, I've got a wife, I'm happy, and like that was it, that would actually be like a really satisfying, wholesome way to end out Perrin's story. And I wouldn't even be mad about it. But I mean, I don't really see that happening. But if it did, I'd be like, it's actually kind of really beautiful. But I predict that his whole party will be drawn to Rand's direction by his like dragon rebornness. Alright, and that's really it for all of my predictions. So I guess I'll see you at about page 300, unless something really worth talking about happens in that first 300 pages and I don't want to forget about it, or I want to read you something. Then I'll see you before page 300. But just before we move on, I have one more thing to say. I have started a second channel called Bennett's Bar. It's all about like nerdy themed cocktails and bartending. So in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be starting making my first couple of videos. I'm going to be doing a Wheel of Time video. I think the Wheel of Time video will be my first one. I've been working on drinks. I've got like the Sayadine and the Sayadar. I've got the White Tower. I've got an Aes Sedai. I've got like a couple of different themed drinks. I've got like a Two Rivers drink. Some of them are shots, some of them are martinis, some of them are old fashions, some are sours, some is a rum punch. So I've got like a few different drinks, it's a few different themed, all from the Wheel of Time. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to link the second channel down in my description, so feel free to go and like subscribe to that channel if you want to help me out. It'll be a lot of fun, and I've probably come up with maybe 15 drinks for the Wheel of Time, so I'm going to have a couple of different Wheel of Time episodes on that channel. Definitely go and check it out. It's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of nerding out, a lot of bartending, and I guess I'll see you in the next 300 pages. Alright, I am officially up to page 300, and we've got a few things to talk about. A lot has happened in the first 300 pages, and I'm going to break it down by the character, storyline, groups, or whatever that we've been following. Firstly, let's start talking about Lanfear. Lanfear is a character that I haven't really talked about a lot, but I really want to start talking about her a lot more because I have a feeling that later on in the stories, there's going to be a lot of interesting things happening with Lanfear, and I'm going to regret not giving my early thoughts and predictions on her in these earlier books. Now, we saw some really interesting stuff happen with Lanfear in the last book, and in the beginning of this one so far. Specifically, I want to talk about the group meeting that all the Forsaken had. And one of the really interesting things that I noticed about that group meeting was that Lanfear told the other Forsaken that one guy, the one Forsaken, and his name is escaping me right now, the one that she put the block on, she told the other Forsaken that he had betrayed them. Which was really interesting because in the last book, she did threaten that guy that she would do that. But it seemed more like it was like an empty threat. Like she was saying, if you do not cooperate with us, then I will go and tell the Forsaken that you've betrayed them. But the fact is, she still went and told them that he betrayed them, even though he was agreeing to help Rand learn how to channel. And that was something that I thought was very interesting. The next thing is, I really don't know whose side that she's on. Like, we find out that she was like a simp for Luz Theron Telamon, and he was really like in charge of her or on top of her or the dominant one in the relationship, however you want to look at it. And that's really interesting to find out, because with her interactions with Rand, she's the one that's like on top, so to speak. And as the reader, I have no idea whose side she's on, because I feel as if like her ultimate goal is to usurp the Dark One, is to become bigger and better than the Dark One with Rand at her side. That's what I feel is like her ultimate goal, but there's just a lot of like really sussy stuff that she's doing that as the reader I'm like, what is really going on here with Lanfear? Next, let's talk about Schwan or Swan. I'm going to call her Swan, and Min and Leanne or Liana. I'm going to call her Leanne. Their whole story has been pretty interesting as well. These women trying to learn to live a life without being able to channel. And that's a really interesting prospect and something I'm really enjoying seeing like evolve and unfold. You know, Swan is looking back over her old like contacts from the White Tower, all of her old like spy networks, all of the things that she can do with just like the knowledge that she'd gained from being in that position without using her power. And Leanne is using the ability to be sexy that she learnt from being, when she was younger, before she knew how to channel. And it's just really interesting to watch these women like grow and evolve and try to find, a reason to live, because it is said that once a person is stilled, they quickly just want to, end it all. So it's interesting to watch them try and find a reason to live and like a way to be happy and a way to get revenge. But I feel as if like the revenge isn't the main focus of their story so far. It's just these women just like trying to find their place in the world, where once their place was like very clear and defined and dominant in the world, now they're just like swirling in this vortex with no idea of what's going on. And then you add Min, who's like lovesick with Rand, and then you throw in Logain as well, and he's like stealing horses and burning down bars or barns and like throwing rocks at people and causing all kinds of mischief. It just creates like this really interesting dynamic, especially also with the whole Logain and Swan, how they're kind of battling for dominance in their little party. And just one more thing I'll say about like that little friendship group, or whatever you want to call them. I'm so glad that Bella, the horse from the Two Rivers, I'm so glad that Bella is still in this story. And I will sincerely and legitimately be incredibly sad if Bella dies. I want, at the very end of the story, for like everyone to settle down on a farm, or maybe there's like a big hero parade going on, and somebody is on Bella, preferably Rand, because it was his initial horse, I believe. Or if Rand dies, because like that is part of the prophecy that Rand is meant to die. If Rand dies, maybe like Bella is pulling his funeral cart to the graveyard or whatever. I don't know. I just hope that Bella isn't killed in battle or like by some kind of raid or something. Just let the horse live. Next, let's move on to talking about Rand and all the like craziness that's going on with Rand in the Wastes. There has been a lot of development with Rand in this particular book. I think the most notable thing that we could all agree on is the moment when, like, Moraine apologizes to Rand, when he, like, calls her out on her stuff. And before that as well, when Rand calls Moraine little sister as well. Because as he's, like, slowly losing his mind and, like, connecting with all these past lives, he's just, like, feeling words that feel a lot more appropriate to use in situations that are from a past life. And he calls Moraine little sister. There's also a whole lot of other interesting stuff that happen here, like when Moraine scrapes off part of the seal that she had, and Rand is just there, and he just like panics, and he just goes like, "I'm not ready for this yet. I'm not ready for this yet." And that's a really interesting moment because he's like so resigned to his fate of having to be part of that final battle at Shao Ghul. He just wants to be ready for it. He is almost at the level of Blade Master. It was mentioned that he's almost at the level of Blade Master from Lan and all of his training, but he's nowhere near that strong when it comes to wielding the One Power. And that was just a really interesting point that I did really like, because it was nice to get that kind of confirmation that Rand is going to accept his fate of having to fight the Dark One. It was nice to get that confirmation because the White Tower thinks that there is no way that he will go willingly to that fight. So he's trying to like train himself and become stronger and, build his army and get ready for that fight. And the White Tower is trying to capture him and stop him so they can like send him to that fight, but without the training because they can't train him, and without an army because he needs to be out in the world, rallying people to his cause. So that's just like a really interesting dynamic that the White Tower is trying to help the world, but in reality they are stifling Rand's attempt at gaining power and followers and helping the world in a better way. It was interesting that they made Rhuidean a place that anyone could visit, right? Like the fog of Rhuidean lifts and then people move in. I thought that was a really interesting thing, and I feel like there's going to be more to it than just that, because I think Rand mentioned that they were sending for Ogiers to come and help rebuild Rhuidean. Although I might be mistaken, maybe they were sending for them to rebuild something else. But that's what I kind of got from that. And so I feel as if there's going to be more with that city. I feel like Rand isn't just going to like pick up go, do whatever he has to do on the other side of the waste, cross the dragon spine or whatever that one's called, and then we never hear from the Wastes or Roydian again. I feel as if that's not going to be the case. One of my predictions that I want to get out there at this kind of early point is I have a feeling that because Lanfear put the one power shield on the Forsaken that's teaching Rand, I have a feeling that because he put it, or she put it on him, and Rand can't see it, I have a feeling that at some point Lanfear's shield is going to just like shrink and disappear. And obviously Rand can't see this shield, so he won't know. So there will be a chance for this guy to betray Rand. Whether or not he'll take it is an entirely different thing, because he does now need Rand to win this battle, because all of the Forsaken now think that he is a traitor. So that's just a prediction that I wanted to get out there. I have a feeling there's going to be some like conflict or some kind of really interesting thing around Rand not being able to see the block Lanfear put on. We finally learn a little bit more about Balefire as well. Like, I remember in the first book, or maybe it was the second book, Moraine uses Balefire. And I know that she definitely uses it to kill the Darkhounds in the third book when they're on their way to Tyr. And we've been hearing for books now that Balefire is forbidden, but we never really learned why until now. And we learned that, Balefire, depending on how strong it is used, removes people from the pattern altogether. And I'm starting to realize maybe that's how Rand is going to defeat the Dark One, by using Balefire on him in such a absolute nuclear way that it removes the Dark One from the pattern forever. That seems like pretty straightforward and logical, and I will put that as an official prediction because that just kind of makes sense. But now let's move on to the girls. Let's talk about Elaine and Nynaeve traveling with Tom and Julian Sandar. I said at the beginning that I had the prediction that the Shonchan woman would betray them. But oddly, the Shonchan woman wasn't even in the story at all. We just kind of joined them as they're traveling away from that city in the back of a carriage. So between books, they'd had their goodbyes or they'd gone in their separate directions. Which was something I was not expecting at all, because this is a character that was built up quite a lot, and was really built up as a character that had their trust but also had their mistrust, and the author could really do a lot of things with them. So I have no doubt in my mind that she will come back in the future. I can't imagine that that is the last we'll see of her. I really liked that they decided to take a carriage, because they were talking about whether or not they should take a boat or take a carriage. I'm really glad that they, chose to travel by land and took the carriage, because it really did re-spark up that feeling of romance that I was talking about in another review, where, you read this story and it makes you want to get outside, go camping, sit by a fire, sit under a tree, just be outdoors, buy a horse, learn how to ride a horse, take care of your horse. Just these little romantic things that just make you appreciate the little things in life. And I'm really glad that this story went back to that, because for the last 2 books we haven't really had a lot of that romance that I was talking about, because we've had a lot of boat travel, or traveling through the ways, or traveling by the portal stones. So I'm really glad that we're going back to this warm feeling of traveling. Also, and while we're talking about the girls, we've got to talk about how they were kidnapped. That was really interesting. I had no doubt in my mind when they were taken. I wasn't expecting them to be drugged and taken. That came as a shock. But I had no doubt in my mind that when they were taken, it was due to the tower and not due to the Black Arja. Although at this point, they all seem like equal threats, so, it wouldn't work out better for them either way. But I did really enjoy that part, and it was interesting to see the power shift and kind of just Nynaeve's mindset, how she was tricked, how she was able to drink a root that she didn't know would, cause a paralysis and the ability to not channel. And then she lies to Egwene in the dream world and the other wise one. But that also brings me on to a really weird point that I wanted to talk about. What is going on with Elaine and Tom? Because I was when I was reading the earlier books, I thought there was Tom might be Elaine's father. And, reading this one, watching them be close and talk and, Elaine kind of looking up to him, it gave me that vibe of like Elaine looking up to her father and thinking Tom might be her dad. But when Nynaeve pulls Elaine aside and is like, "What are you doing? Why are you like hitting on Tom?" Elaine's like, "Why shouldn't I hit on Tom? He's a man." It's like my, nurse used to say, "A man is a man whether he's on a throne or in a pigsty," which is a fantastic quote, by the way. And, that whole conversation unfolds, and it just makes it feel like Elaine is trying to bang Tom, but I thought Tom was meant to be Elaine's possible father. So I don't know, that was real weird for me. Was I reading into that wrong? Was I reading into it that maybe Tom was just like an old dude that was around while she was a kid, and so she feels like a familiarity with him that could turn into love? But I don't know, the way I read it, it made me feel as if Tom was potentially her father. Anyway, so I got a lot of questions about this book, and I hope that they will unfold in the next 300 pages. I'll see you in another 300 pages. Peace out. Hello again. I am officially up to page 568, or the beginning of chapter 36. I was originally planning on doing this review closer to page 600, but so much has happened in the last two chapters that I felt as if we had to stop and talk about it now. Firstly, I just wanted to talk about the general vibe of this book. Now, all of the Wheel of Time books that I've read so far, I've noticed that they've all taken about 200 pages to start up. It's a very slow start for these books, but between that like 200 to 300, especially between page 250 to 300, a lot of really interesting stuff will happen. And I've noticed that that's been the pattern with all of the Wheel of Time books that I've read so far, and it'll be really interesting if that pattern sticks throughout the entire series. But when it came to this one, I really felt as if this book was playing a lot more of the role of setting up a lot of the story. It felt like it was suffering from second book syndrome. It was not so much an interesting story as it was a story that would set up the rest of the books coming. Not that the stuff that was happening in here wasn't particularly interesting. It just wasn't as amazing as the other books were. Until, of course, we just got into the last 2 or 3 chapters, then everything just starts blowing up and all this crazy stuff starts happening. And firstly, we have to talk about Nynaeve and Mogadine and Brigitta inside the world of dreams, because like that whole sequence, everything that happened there was just like crazy, and it just happened, and I really want to talk about it. So that scene where like Brigitta takes Nynaeve to go and spy on the Forsaken, and then they come back to the circus, but Mogadine followed them, she like tracked them or whatever, and she like throws Brigitta away, and then she's like got Nynaeve up in like this weave, and she's like crushing her, and Nynaeve's thinking that her like spine is about to break and she's about to get all kinds of messed up. And Mogadine like lightly tortures her and explains like, every time you come back into the world of dreams, you are going to be my horse, and I'm going to ride you, and I'm going to enjoy it, but I will ensure that you do not. And she starts to set up the compulsion that she is going to make Nynaeve block Elaine off from the One Power and then bring her to Mogadine. And I really liked this part. I really liked this part because we didn't really see if she did compel Nynaeve or if she was just talking about compelling Nynaeve. So it feels like for the rest of this story, for the rest of this like arc, while they're, out in the wilderness or out in the wild, and they're doing whatever they're doing, they're trying to find the Blue Azure, I believe. And that's when they will, reconnect with Schwan and Min, and, I'm sure they'll reconnect with Rand too. But I really like that we get this kind of like grey zone where we're like, did Mogadine compel Nynaeve, or did she just like lightly compel Nynaeve? And Nynaeve does not know that she's compelled now, but she will make, some decision or another that will lead them to Mogadine with Elaine without her really knowing why she made those decisions. And it's one of those things where I keep talking about, one of these things that I really like about this story is how anyone can be a dark friend, so you never really know who to trust. And it feels like, at least for myself, during the rest of this story and probably the next story, I'm going to be really severely looking out to see if Nynaeve does anything suspicious, Nynaeve does anything kind of out of the ordinary that would suggest she is being compelled to take Elaine to Mogadine. And even if that's not what's going to happen, just like that grayness of that whole period that would make me think that, I think was brilliant. I loved that whole sequence, everything that happened there, the like stress of it all before Brigadette like shoots her arrow through Mogadine's chest and like saves the day and all that drama, and then she like rocks up into the real world because she'd been like ripped out of the Wheel of Time, so now we don't know if she's still connected to the wheel. We don't know if like when they blow that horn, is she still going to be summoned, because like it's the heroes that are attached to the wheel that are summoned. So it's just like, there's so many questions, there's so much drama that we don't know about, but now she's in the real world and bonded to Elaine as a warder, which is just like a whole nother other thing in itself. Like now Elaine, for a warder, has got this like hero of ages. I don't know, it's just a whole lot of just like really interesting, crazy stuff. There's just like, it's created so many questions, it's created so many dramas and problems, and it's definitely not something I would have ever predicted. But I'm really, really interested to see where the author goes with this kind of like plot thread that he's created. And then on top of that, while we're talking about like ridiculous things that I never would have predicted and like plot lines that I can't wait to see what happens, we got to talk about Leandrin and the Black Aja and how Mogadine comes back into their like midst or whatever, and she's got the arrow in her, and she says to one of the Black Sisters, you know, you've got the ability to heal, you've got only a basic ability, but you need to do that to me right now. And the Black Aja goes and like heals her, and in that moment, you know, it does remind us that the healing does not come from the one power, it does not come from the magic itself, it comes from the human body. And we really get like that reminder that, you know, Mogadine is very weak. She got an arrow like just below her heart, or like next to her heart, so she's in a really rough state right now, and she just got healed, so it's as if she was an invalid for weeks. And then she like turns her back on Leandrin when the other sisters are leading her to the bedroom, and Leandrin is like, this is my chance. She's like weak and she's got her back turned, so she like goes to hit her with like everything that she can muster, but then Mogadine is just like poof, block. And this next part I never would have expected. Like when that happened, I was like, oh, Leandrin, you messed up, but you kind of deserve to get beaten or whatever she's about to do to you. But then she like slams her against the wall and ties her off from the magic, or ties her off from the one power, and she does a very intricate, convoluted, like heaps of knots and loops and ties and bumps and whatever, so that it would be impossible or next to impossible for someone to undo the tie that is stopping Leandrin from channeling the one power. And she explains that it is a fate worse than stilling, because with stilling, you know that you can't use the magic anymore. That's it. That's it. There's no ifs, buts, or coconuts. It sucks, but you now have to move on with your life and start a family or start a farm or learn to paint or cook or sew or whatever. But in Leandrin's case, because she still has the magic and she can still feel the one power, and all she needs is someone that can untie this, and not for her, she will always have that hope, which, you know, hope can be more painful than acceptance. And Mogadine knew that, and so she compelled Leandrin to not kill herself as well, because she knew that, like, with that hope, it would come hand in hand with despair, and she would want to, like, do that to herself, so she compels her to keep herself alive. As well, she implies that, you know, the people that she's going to be a maid for, they're going to, like, beat her and treat her quite badly. No doubt under Mogadine's orders. So that also was just something I was not expecting at all, and it'll be really interesting because I have no doubt that Nynaeve will still catch up to her. So it will be really interesting to find out what happens when Nynaeve catches up to her and she's been tied off from the one power. Will Nynaeve let like rage get the better of her and she like blows up Leandrin? Or will she see the suffering Leandrin is going through and just be like, you know what, I'm gonna leave you in the state that I found you because this is a fate worse than stilling. You knowing that there is hope, but you will never get it. And of course, we have to discuss Rand and Aviendha hooking up. Like, what? I was not expecting that at all. But, I mean, it's definitely worth talking about. I said in my, last book review, and I probably said at the beginning of this review, it's been a while since I started this review, that I ship Rand and Aviendha. Like, I was like, you know what? I like them together. They kind of butt heads. But I honestly was not expecting them to hook up. Like, that was not even in the slightest was I expecting that to happen. But I think something has to be said here in Robert Jordan's ability to write really just understandable and believable characters. Because we've all known people that have had just like a lot of tension between them, whether it be like because of this, that, or the other, but they've just had a lot of tension between them, and then suddenly that tension breaks and they just like suddenly sleep together. And you're like, wait, didn't you guys like hate each other a minute ago? Now you're like hooking up? What the hell's going on here? And it never really makes sense in real life, but the way that Robert Jordan has written these characters and like that kind of tension between them and the cultural differences and how, you know, Aviendha kind of feels guilty because she is Elaine's like close sister or near sister or whatever it was that she was. And it'll be really interesting to see how the story continues forward now that that tension has been broken. Although I did find a couple of things funny, like how Rand was like, oh man, we've slept together, now we have to get married. And Aviendha's just like, what? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I did really like that part. Also, I liked that after they hooked up, that chapter ends with Aviendha watching Rand get dressed. And then the very next chapter is called A Short Spear. Now, I'm just saying, I don't think that was a coincidence. I have a feeling that Robert Jordan wrote that joke in. I will say one more thing before we finish this part and move on to like the end of this book review. It's odd that we haven't heard anything from Perrin yet, especially considering that his story was like the best part of the last book. Like that the whole Perrin section was phenomenal. After they get to the Two Rivers, the whole Perrin and Fail thing, that was dumb and I hated it. Right up until after they left the ways and then, you know, they sort all that out, and that entire like Perrin section is just great. And then it ends with Fail and Perrin getting married. So it's really interesting that we haven't heard anything yet from Perrin, considering that his story was the best in the last story, and it ended in an incredibly interesting way. But in saying that, I don't think it would hurt this story at all if we didn't hear from Perrin during this story, because his story ended in such a great way that if this book was to end and we hadn't heard anything from Perrin, and then we open up the next book, like the 6th book in the series, and it's like, oh yeah, Perrin and Fail this whole time, they were just chilling out. They were on their honeymoon. They were just, you know, rolling around in the meadows, living their happy honeymoon life. It wouldn't be out of place at all, and it would make sense because it would allow so much more of the story to be set up in this regard, and then Perrin and Fail could just latch onto someone else's story. They could find Rand and be like, oh, okay, we're ready to roll with Rand again. Or they could find the girls and be like, yep, we're ready to roll with the girls again. Or, of course, Perrin could have his own brand new story built up because this guy's a fantastic author and he can do whatever the hell he wants. Anyway, I'll see you at the end of the book unless I decide to stop at page 900 because there's a bunch of other stuff that happens. But I guess we'll find out in a second. See you then. Alright, so I finished the book, and it turns out that a lot happened in the last 400 pages, so let's just get straight into talking about it. First of all, I figured out that this book is the one that I started to like Nynaeve in. I've spoken about it in a couple of other reviews. A lot of people that have read the series do say that they enjoy Nynaeve's character and they enjoy, you know, where she starts, where she ends, and kind of all that stuff. But I never really saw it. I never liked Nynaeve from the beginning, and I didn't like her right up until about the end of this book. But this book, I felt, was the book that we got to see Nynaeve being humbled a lot more, and we got to see her being a lot more human. Which is also what I realize is why Nynaeve has that block on her power. Because, it would be odd, or it would be a bad choice to have this character that is so unlikable in a lot of the things that she does, and then to have her with like an unrestrained ability to channel as well as anyone else. The fact that she gets humbled by her block and like sees her friends overtaking her in the power and, for example, Egwene, all the things that she can do inside the dream world, and Elaine, the fact that she can just channel in general and is a lot more useful than Nynaeve is, because Nynaeve has to be angry in order to channel. And I feel as if the author did this really incredibly on purpose. Like, I feel as if this was thoroughly planned, because especially with all the things that happened with Brigitta, I love Brigitta. I think she's one of my favorite characters of the story. But especially all of the ways that Brigitta interacted with Nynaeve, and how she's constantly telling Nynaeve, like, I am my own person, I made my decision, you are not responsible for me, I am not a child. And, Brigitta would wear the dress that Nynaeve refused to wear, or she was like a lot more confident in herself because she was this, hero of ages that was tied to the wheel. And I think it really shows that the author wanted us to like Nynaeve by the end of this story, because there is like a conversation that happens around another Wilder teaching Nynaeve how to get past her magical block so that way she can start channeling the power without being furious. And that feels really purposefully done. It feels like these 5 books were her like growing, her humbling herself, her learning more about the outside world. And now that we as the readers see her as more of a humbled, likable character, the author feels free to unblock Nynaeve so she can, do everything she can be as helpful as she wants to be, and she doesn't need that block to make her more relatable anymore. That's just my personal opinion on that. I would love to hear everyone else's opinion. Did you like Nynaeve before this book? Did you still not like Nynaeve after this book? Personally, I found that I did, especially like Brigitta and her interactions with like Swan, how like she and Swan were like just fighting in the dirt like children, all that kind of stuff. It did help to like humble her and make her just that much more likable. And I think it was really needed for her character, and I am more than happy for her to get unblocked in the power because I've now started to like her. Next, I want to read you the last paragraph of the last page. So this happens on page 963, and it is the very last paragraph of the story, in case you're interested. And it's in regard to Morghese and how she's like escaped from her land and is looking for friends to help her get back her throne. And it says, she heeled her mount hard, letting the horses leap forward, break their gazes apart, letting it shove past him. He could catch up to her. She would find her allies where she found them. She would have her throne back, and woe to Gabriel or any man who thought he could sit on it in her place. Now, this whole thing with Morghese, or Morghese, or however you want to say her name, that whole thing, I have a feeling is just going to create a whole lot of unnecessary drama for Rand. I have a feeling that word is going to get to Morghese saying like, oh, there is this man, Rand al'Thor, the Dragon Reborn, he has taken your throne and he is sitting in it, even though we did hear Rand say that Caemlyn has always had a queen, and as far as he's concerned, Elaine is the new queen, because Morghese died. Or, as far as he's aware, Morghese died. And these allies that Morghese is looking for, I have a feeling that she is going to end up in Salidar with all of the Aes Sedai there, which will be a nice little reunion between Morghese and Elaine, or maybe it won't be a nice little reunion, who knows. But that is my prediction. I predict that there's going to be a lot of like false drama. I think Elaine is going to get mad at Rand before she can like find out from Rand that he didn't actually take the throne, and there's just going to be a lot of unnecessary drama in that regard. Also, in saying that, I want to talk about Salidar and how like the girls got there and all that kind of good stuff. I do not like that the girls went to Salidar. I don't like that they all joined up with the Aes Sedai, and the Aes Sedai turned on them and was just like, oh, cool. Thanks for, defeating the Black Azure and finding out all this information for us and bringing us all this, like, cool loot that we really desperately needed, as well as information and the ability to spy on the White Tower. We really appreciate that. But now you're basically just scum again. You're just basically kids. We don't care about you. You're going to stay here and just keep learning. And obviously, I don't expect that to last very long into the next book, but I hate that it happened at all. I hate this, like, feeling of them being trapped there. I would rather have them back on the road, maybe looking for Rand in Tyr, or, obviously they can speak to Egwene through the dream world, so there's no reason why they can't know exactly where they are and go straight to Rand. So I'm really hoping that in the next book they do just go straight to, like, Rand, or they don't even need to go to Rand. They can go anywhere they want, as long as they're not just sticking there, just kind of like miserable, hating their lives while they have to learn things from people they don't like. I was enjoying their story being told, and I would like to continue their story being told. Also, let's talk about Nynaeve leashing Mogadine in, like, the World of Dreams to go and help Rand in his big fight at the end. That was crazy. And, like, there's so much foreshadowing for that moment in when, like, Elaine has got, like, the leash and the collar, and she's studying it, and she keeps, like, trying to tell Nynaeve about this leash and, how it works and the power behind it and how it feels and, blah, blah, blah. And Elaine keeps trying to tell Nynaeve all this information, but Nynaeve is just like, homie, I do not want to hear it. Don't tell it to me. You shouldn't even be touching that. You shouldn't be looking at it. You shouldn't be thinking of it. And when Elaine says that she could recreate it, Nynaeve is just like, what? What the hell? Why would you ever want to even think about that? And all that was just, like, foreshadowing, getting, like, those little snippets of information about how it works and how it's created and how it feels, all leading up to the point where Nynaeve leashes Mogadine. That whole part of the story from, like, right up until, even before that, like, when she is in, like, the circus and, like, all that stuff happens with Brigitta, and then Nynaeve is just, like, terrified to enter the World of Dreams because she knows that Mogadine might be there to kill her. And then in the end, it's not that she overcomes her fears, it's that she faces her fears to be able to collar Mogadine and then use her to her own whims. But more than that, even though she uses her to help Rand in his fight at the end, she gives Mogadine that, like, fork tongue root or whatever it was that will put her in a pretty darn deep sleep. And as Mogadine is going to sleep, Nynaeve says, oh, I never told you about Salidar. I never said anything about that while I was in the dream world. I never said, blah, blah, or blah, blah, or blah, blah while I was in the dream world. And then she says, I will see you in Salidar. So, like, we now know that Nynaeve knows that whoever Mogadine is pretending to be in the real world, we know that she knows that she is in Salidar. And it should be pretty obviously easy for them to find it because it'll be the one woman that's in, like, a coma-like sleep. I loved that moment. I thought that was brilliant. I thought it was great. I thought it was, like, a nice little twisty turn. I thought it was great. The whole thing, that whole entire Nynaeve storyline in this book, I liked. It's basically like Perrin's in the last book, where he had, like, the best storyline, clearly by far, in the entire book. Now we had, like, Nynaeve, who had the best storyline. Also, just in mentioning Perrin, it was a bit weird that we didn't get any Perrin in this story at all. Like, I don't think there was a single chapter with Perrin in it. But in all fairness, like, Perrin's story did end off so well in the last book that we didn't really need any of Perrin's story. It gave a lot more page time for us to develop those feelings for Nynaeve, or for us to get a peek into Rand's madness, which is another thing that I really enjoyed about this story, is how, like, loose Rand's mind was becoming, how he was, like, slowly losing his mind to lose Theron Telamon, and, like, the voices in his head and the past and all that. It does bring up one question that I have. Is Rand tied to the Wheel of Time? Right, so I know that Luz Theron is tied to the Wheel of Time because, he is who he is. But is every reincarnation of Luz Theron also tied to the Wheel of Time? Is that how that works? Or is it just Luz Theron? Like, for example, Brigadetta, I know that she is tied to the Wheel of Time as her, and she talks about all of the past lives she has lived and that man that she's with every life. But is all of her other lives tied to the Wheel of Time as well, or is it just Brigadetta that is? And then she just has memories of past lives. I hope that question made sense. I hope that I, like, put the distinction in my question as to, like, what I'm really trying to ask. But I would really appreciate the answer if it is not a spoiler. Alright, so now we have to talk about Rand, and we can't talk about Rand without talking about Moraine. Now, Moraine is another one of those characters that I was like really iffy about. I was like, do I like her? Do I not like her? Yeah. And I'm still kind of iffy about her, to tell you the truth, but I don't think she's dead. I don't believe for a second that Moraine is dead, even though we do get Land feeling his bond shift to a different Aes Sedai, which I'm pretty sure is Nynaeve. I'm pretty sure we got that in the last book. Moraine changed her bond to go to Nynaeve once she died. I'm pretty sure that was like not concealed from us as the reader, although it was concealed from Lan. So that part there, where Lan's bond shifts, it's kind of like a, look, Moraine's dead, his bond is shifted, she doesn't exist anymore, so just move on with your lives. But I don't believe for a second that Moraine is dead, and I also don't believe for a second that Lanfear is dead. And it was funny, because it wasn't until right up to the end of the book, and you know what, I actually probably have it marked. I will see if I can find the exact quote. So this is right at the end of the book. Asmodean is playing his harp, and then he's going to the kitchen in order to find some wine to drink. He was hardly sorry Lanfear was dead, Ravin either, but Lanfear especially for what she had done to him. He would laugh when each of the others died too, and most for the last. It was not that he had been reborn as a new man at all, but he would cling to that tuft of grass on the cliff's brink as long as he could. The roots would give way eventually, the long fall would come, but until then he was still alive. He pulled open a small door, intending to find his way to the pantry. There should be some decent wine. One step and he stopped, the blood draining from his face. You? No. The word still clung in the air when death took him. So it wasn't until that passage where he says, I'm not at all sad that Lanfear has died. That was the only part in the entire story where I thought, oh wow, you know what, Lanfear could theoretically be dead. But under no circumstance did I believe that Moraine was dead, so it just stood to reason that, in my mind, Lanfear was also not dead. And it wasn't until that sentence when I was like, oh, okay, I guess maybe some people might think that Lanfear is dead. But then in the very next sentence, he's like killed by a mysterious figure off screen, and we can pretty much presume that it's more than likely Lanfear. Alright, let's talk about Rand now. A lot happened with Rand's character in this story. First of all, he's like losing his marbles, he's losing his grip on reality, he's like losing this fight in his head to keep Luz Theron Telamon out of his head, which honestly I do really like that as the books are progressing, we're seeing him losing his marbles just a bit more and a bit more, and I don't know if it also goes with how strong he's becoming in the One Power, but I do like that we're getting that power escalation and that like craziness escalation at the same time. Personally, I don't know if it is connected, but like if it is or if it isn't, I still like that they're both increasing at the same time. Also, one of the most like irritating and annoying things about Rand has been whatever his deal was with like women in battle. And especially with like Lanfear and the Spear Sisters, he didn't want any of the Sisters of the Spears to die, and he also couldn't bring himself to like do anything to Lanfear, even though she is one of the most evil, strongest people in the world. And it felt really good that his perception of that entire thing was starting to shift towards the end of this story, especially when that one specific Aiel woman was like, you do us a great dishonor by leaving us out of this fight. You're taking 100 men from each of these other clans, but you're not taking any of the Spear Sisters. You are doing us a great dishonor. And Rand is like, the reason I'm leaving you out of this fight is because I cannot send a woman to die for me. It will break my heart to see a woman die in battle for me. And the Spear Sister says, I'm either going to die a hero in this life, or maybe I can die a hero in the next life. And she heavily implies to Rand that the dishonor that he is bringing onto all of these Spear Sisters is going to make them all kill themselves, so that way they can seek glory in another life. And honestly, I did really like that. I really liked that, it was so annoying from book one, Rand's kind of refusal to see women as an enemy, or however you want to look at that. And then in this one, it's very clearly these women are you are dishonoring us by looking at us that way. You are dishonoring us by not treating us as warriors. And it was thrust in his face that you must change these ideas. Although in saying that, if Lanfear is really dead, then it does come at like kind of a weird time, because like the main big bad evil woman that he would have had to fight is like dead, even though I'm pretty sure she's not. One of my other predictions for the next coming books, I have a feeling that that explosion that happened on the docks that took out like all those people, and before Moraine tackled Lanfear through the doorway, and it like messed Egwene up pretty bad, right? And they were just like saying to her, like, you are going to be bedridden for a while, all you're going to be doing is resting, don't even think about going into the world of dreams. I am making an official prediction that Egwene is going to spend the next book, like a lot of her time is going to be spent in the world of dreams. Like, she might even be like comatose in the real world or whatever. I don't know how, it's going to play out, but I have a feeling that she is going to spend a lot of her time recovering in bed, but living through the world of dreams. Besides Nynaeve, I think the person that had the best character story in this book was Mat. I loved everything to do with Mat in this story. I loved how he became like the banner of the Red Hand, how he like became this leader of warriors through battle, even though it was very much the last thing he wanted to do. It was just like he saw an Aiel ambush from Couladin's Aiel, and he was like, I can't let these people just like ride into their deaths. I've got to do something here. And so he went down and like prevented that ambush from like wiping them out. And I really like that Mat is also, he's not so much losing his mind, but I also like that his past lives are really starting to come out from him. We're seeing a lot of like war strategy from him, which is something that I really enjoy reading about. And we're seeing him like command men, like he's been doing it for his whole life, and the strategizing and all that. And it's just something that I really enjoyed reading about with Mat's character. And then we get that he like kills his girlfriend. I mean, she was pretty suspicious from the beginning, I'm not gonna lie. I'm sure I wasn't the only one that saw something like that coming. But yeah, everything to do with Mat in this story I did really enjoy. I really enjoyed him trying to slip away, but like something just drew him back. He couldn't slip away, he had to stay. And even right up to the point where he dies, which, I mean, like, I did not presume that he would die. I thought, like, something's going to happen. I didn't expect Aviendha and Mat to die at the exact same time, plus Asmodean as well. Like, all three of them were dead from that lightning bolt. I did not expect that. I thought it was great that Mat killed Couladin. I did think it was odd at the time that Mat killed Couladin and not Rand, and I did also think it was odd that we did not see the fight between Mat and Couladin. But as the story progressed, it made a lot more sense that Mat killed Couladin because Rand had to fight the guy at the end. And, it would have been, like, weird, or it would have been, like, an odd story choice if Rand fought both Couladin and, the Chosen at the end. So it made more sense for Mat to kill Couladin. Plus, it, like, really helped to bolster his reputation between the Aiel and everyone else, and kind of build his story and reputation. And I do want to read you this one quote about Mogadine, but like before we really know everything that's going on. It happens on page 641, and it's after Galad tells Nynaeve about Salidar to like spark her memory of it. Nynaeve expected the news about Salidar to startle them, or excite them, or anything but what it did. Brigitta took it as matter-of-factly as if she'd said they would eat supper with Tom and Julian that night. Plainly she meant to go where Elaine did, and all else mattered little. Elaine looked doubtful. Doubtful? Are you certain? You've tried so hard to remember, and, well, it seems awfully fortuitous that Galad should just happen to mention it to you. Now, I wrote down that page number, and I wrote down that quote, because I had a feeling that Galad was being compelled by Mogadine to send the girls to Salidar where she would be waiting for them. Which is sort of kind of exactly what happened. The girls did go to Salidar and we found out that Mogadine was there waiting for them. So if in the next book it happens that Galad was under compulsion from Mogadine, that's the page that it happens on. That's the page that it happens. That's just another future prediction I have. Alright, and that's it for this Wheel of Time review. I'm really excited for the Wheel of Time premiere that's coming out. I had a whole bunch of Wheel of Time videos that are coming in the future, so, like, subscribe, leave a comment, send your love and support. I always appreciate it. And as always, thank you very much.